That. Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue.
This may look like a routine exchange at a press briefing, but it's actually a moment where institutional trust is being quietly renegotiated. What's really being tested here is how power defines transparency when accountability becomes inconvenient. When answers rely on procedure instead of clarity, the stakes shift from individual decisions to the credibility of the justice system itself. In this video, we'll break down how language, timing, and restraint shape what the public is allowed to know, and why that matters for democratic oversight.
$1 billion. Go ahead, and off topic.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
What are the next steps, Madam Attorney General, for the DOJ regarding what we assume President Trump will sign into law with the Epstein files? Is this going to be on the Justice Department website? What are you doing here over the next 30 days as we understand it?
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
Yeah. When you say follow the law, Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Wedding, Madam General. On Ryan Wedding, you mentioned.
Madam Attorney General, the issue with the new information that you just indicated, is the department seeking information perhaps from the Epstein estate, because Mr. Blanche did not have that information when he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell? What new information? And would you limit the new investigation to just those named persons that the president talked about, or is this a broad, open-ended investigation?
I would refer to the Deputy Attorney General's post that he put out on X, and we're not going to say anything else on that because now it is a pending investigation in the Southern District of New York. But you're on point. Hard stop. One more question.
The moment hangs in the room as the questions stop, and the answers circle back to the same careful phrase: we will follow the law. Again and again, Attorney General Pam Bondi repeats it: maximum transparency, protection of victims. A promise, carefully worded, delivered under the bright lights of scrutiny. And then the exchange ends, not with resolution, but with a hard stop. One more question cut off, the hearing moves on. But the weight of what was just said and what was not said lingers long after the microphones fall silent. What unfolded in those few minutes was not just a procedural update about documents or timelines. It was a window into how power responds when history refuses to stay buried. More than 33,000 files already released. A new investigation now active in the Southern District of New York. A law passed by both chambers, waiting for a presidential signature. And at the center of it all, a Justice Department walking a narrow line between public demand and legal restraint. Bondi's words were measured, deliberate, almost rehearsed. She spoke of transparency as a principle, but always paired it with limitation. Transparency under the law. Transparency while protecting victims. Transparency, but not yet clarity. That distinction matters. Because in moments like this, the public isn't just listening for legal compliance, it's listening for moral direction, for a signal that accountability is not just possible, but inevitable. When pressed on what had changed since earlier statements suggesting no further inquiry was warranted, the answer was simple and vague at the same time. New information. Additional information. Enough, it seems, to reopen doors that were once considered closed. Enough to justify another look. Enough to prompt another round of questions. Questions that, for now, remain unanswered. This is how institutions speak when the stakes are enormous. When every word carries legal consequence, when silence can be strategic and precision can be protective. But it's also how trust is tested. Because the public remembers when assurances were made before, when reviews were completed, when conclusions were drawn. And now, those conclusions appear less final than once believed. The exchange also revealed something deeper about the American system itself. Oversight does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes in fragments, a follow-up question, a refusal to elaborate, a reference to a post made elsewhere. Power is rarely surrendered all at once. It is negotiated inch by inch, under pressure, under law, and under public gaze. Notice how often the phrase, "we will follow the law," was repeated. Not "we will release everything," not "we will name names," not even "we will meet a specific deadline." Just the law. Because the law, in moments like this, becomes both shield and compass. It protects the process, but it can also slow it. And that tension between urgency and procedure defines so many of America's most consequential reckonings. There was also a subtle but important shift in tone when the questions turned to scope. Would this investigation be limited? Would it be broad? Would it involve new sources of information? The answer was no answer at all. A referral, a reminder that the matter is now pending. And in that refusal, a clear message. Once an investigation is active, transparency has boundaries. That is not inherently wrong, but it is inherently unsatisfying, especially for a public that has waited years for clarity, especially for a system that depends on confidence to function. The Justice Department is not just enforcing statutes here. It is managing expectations. And history has shown that expectations once raised are difficult to contain. This moment matters because it exposes the delicate balance between law and accountability, between what can be said and what must be withheld, between transparency as an ideal and transparency as a legal reality. It shows how institutions respond when pressed, how they deflect without denying, how they promise without committing. And it reminds us that democracy is not powered by answers alone. It is powered by persistence, by asking again, by following up, by refusing to accept silence as the final word. Every major turning point in American accountability has followed this same pattern: pressure, pause, resistance, and eventually disclosure. What happens next will not be decided in a single press exchange. It will unfold over weeks, months, and courtrooms, through filings, rulings, and decisions made far from the cameras. But moments like this are where the story becomes visible, where the public gets a glimpse of how seriously power takes its responsibility to the truth. In the end, this was not just about files or timelines. It was about whether the promise of transparency is real or rhetorical, whether following the law leads to illumination or delay, whether accountability is pursued fully or cautiously managed. That question remains open, and it belongs not just to the Justice Department, but to all of us who are watching, listening, and refusing to look away. This is why scrutiny matters. This is why oversight exists. And this is why we continue to document every moment, every exchange, every carefully chosen word. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work to expose the truth.